My guest this week is the multi-talented Simon Amstell, who has just directed a movie which is coming out around now called Benjamin. He's, of course, very famous as a stand-up comedian and television presenter and writer as well. He's done a book all about his life. Thank you very much for coming in.
That's okay.
I suppose the idea of this interview is to give people some thoughts on how to make the world a better place. And if there's a guiding thought behind everything you do, it's kind of brutal honesty, isn't it?
Yes, I think it probably is. I think that's what I've ended up doing through the stand-up and anything that I've written, including this film. The idea is, it's quite selfish, really. I'm not sure if I'm out there trying to change the world, but I'm definitely trying to change myself. So the reason I started writing this film was to try and figure out what was wrong with me in my 20s. And it turned out that I was terrified of intimacy. I didn't know that when I started writing it, but it turned out that this character was so defended that his whole problem really is that he is desperately seeking the love of an audience because he won't let himself be vulnerable enough to just be in a moment with another human being.
And that was you? That
was me. But now I love intimacy.
So when did you work out that was you? You know, during the course of the writing, or before did you start off thinking I've got to write about my problems when I was in my 20s?
I think I just started. I think I just finished doing a load of stand-up and felt like I can't do any more stand-up for a minute, and just started writing conversations or arguments that I'd had with previous boyfriends. And I thought that what I would discover was that I was quite right. They were all lunatics, and I was a victim of, the worst thing that I could have done was choose the wrong people. And it turned out they were dealing with a maniac, a defended maniac who was not in any way emotionally open, not available to love or be loved. And I think I discovered that in the writing of it, and also from having actual therapy. I think it's important to have actual therapy as well.
I'd like to talk about that.
Me too.
In more detail.
Okay.
Well, in fact, why don't we just do it now? I mean, why? Why do you think therapy is so helpful and important?
Well, I mean, you end up saying all the stuff that you're ashamed to say outside of the therapy room, perhaps. And
are there things that you're ashamed to say? Because you seem to say things that most people wouldn't dream of saying in your stand-up and your writing and in the films. There's a lot more, is there, that you don't want to say in public?
No, I feel ashamed at first. I feel really embarrassed. And the stuff that makes really good stand-up and hopefully has made a good film is the stuff that I feel nobody should ever know. That if anybody did find out about, that would be it for me. I'd have to leave the country, I'd be put in a prison. But what I've learned from stand-up is that you summon up the courage to say the thing that you're most scared of, and then nobody minds. Sometimes they laugh a lot, and that laughter seems to be saying either, we feel that as well, you're not insane, or that's quite weird, but we're still here. And either way, there's this kind of acceptance or indifference. And you think, and then you can't believe that you thought that it would be a problem to say the thing out loud. And that has happened every single time I've said anything. There's never been a point where it's been too much or a problem. The problem is keeping the thing inside. The problem is not writing the film. If I'd have not tried to figure out what was wrong with myself, then I would still be the same idiot.
And so what do you get out of therapy that you're not getting elsewhere? Or is it just that's like doing a stand-up every time? Or
there's another person and an expert, somebody who's trained in psychotherapy, who can create a relationship in the room. The therapist I saw for 2 years got that I was terrified of intimacy, and got it quite quickly. I think in the first session I was being quite funny, which is a defense mechanism, of course. She understood that and said, it's really good that you can be funny. You don't have to be funny here. And I got what she was saying, and I carried on. And then she said, you don't have to be interesting. And then I was really confused and said, do you want me to tell these stories but not as well? And what she wanted was me to be authentic and grounded, but I found that very difficult because I'm so funny and interesting.
So it was your therapist who told you had a problem with intimacy rather than you discovering it in therapy?
I'm not sure if she told me, but I think she would point out the moments where I was defending myself and ask me to come back into the room with her. And
I was sacked by my therapist, actually.
What do you mean?
My therapist told me she couldn't help me anymore and that I shouldn't come because I wasn't prepared to be open enough.
Oh, well, maybe now's the time.
Maybe now's the time.
What would you like to talk about, Krishnan?
No, I kept. I think the trouble I had was that I kept trying to head off where I thought she was going. So she would say, "Well, let's talk about how you were born. Your birth. Did you have a smooth birth?" And as far as I remember, it was fine. But my mum tells me it wasn't. But then I thought, I know where she's going. She's going to birth trauma, and
So you're
all
quite
of that.
smart. That's
so
the
I kept
problem.
saying, "Oh, I don't want to talk about that. That's not my problem."
Right. But it sounds like you were 2 steps ahead of her each time because you're clever. And so
or maybe not very clever, actually, because I think you've probably got to be open, haven't you? That's the point of therapy. You've got to just do it and talk.
Do you mind saying why you were there in the first place?
I think I was just going through a period of not being very happy, which is probably why most people go.
And how did you resolve it, if not with a therapist? Drugs? Did you have some drugs?
Drugs? No, it wasn't drugs, actually.
Sex? Lots of sex?
I don't think I did resolve it. I think.
Good. Okay. Fine.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Well,
it's
you've
fine.
done all right, haven't you? You're still on the news.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't resolve
Probably
it.
why I'm still on the news. But why? But this is not about me and my failures with therapy. It's about why you think therapy is a good idea. Because you said you thought therapy is a good idea generally.
It's definitely a good idea. To have somebody else listening, to have somebody else tell you things like, really simple sentences. Like you say something that was kind of that you feel wasn't a big deal, and the therapist will say something like, "That must have been really hard for you," and you're like, "Oh, maybe it was. Oh, it was. Oh God, that was hard. There's some pain there that I haven't dealt with because it's too painful to look at truthfully." And that kind of thing, it gets you out of all the stories that you have in your head about your reality turn out to be nonsense. You've got somebody who has a perspective that isn't just yours. You're not just stuck in your own head. That's why you can't just write something and hope that you'll get better from writing, because it's just you and your own thoughts. And they're deranged thoughts. They're not the thoughts of somebody with an outside perspective who can say things like, "That must have been really hard." Or actually, I had a bit of a top-up session recently with my therapist, and I can't remember what I was saying, but her response was, "Well, that's just insane."
I don't think they're supposed to say that.
So that's not allowed, is it? She said, "I'm sorry, it just slipped out." But yeah.
So you've got these two sort of outlets for sort of truth on stage and in writing and in therapy. But has that meant that your life is now a much more honest or open place?
Yeah, I'm able to just be I think what I'm able to do now, and this is kind of connected to the film, I'm able to be in a moment with another human being without having to feel like I need to be somebody special. Like I don't need to be better than whoever I actually am. And that used to be the thing. There's a scene in the film where Benjamin is being flirted with by this character Noah, this beautiful young musician from Paris. And he doesn't realize he's being flirted with somehow. It's quite obvious, but he doesn't realize. Noah asks if he can come back to his flat, more flirting. Clearly he wants some sex. Benjamin can't quite receive that. Noah goes to kiss him in the flat, and Benjamin says, "Do you want to see a bit of the film that I've made?" And it's because he doesn't feel like he deserves any attention without earning it through some kind of creative razzle-dazzle. And that's the whole problem. Now I feel like I can just be in a moment with another human being without having to feel like I said that already.
But I suppose, feeling the need to be special. I mean, because this was a period when you were famous on TV.
Sure.
And very successful, and you were special. But that had also been the goal, hadn't it? Because you'd been trying to do that since you were a young teenager.
Since about the age of 13, I thought I have to get into the television. And partly that's to do with I thought I would feel safe in the television. There was justice in the television. There was fairness. I used to bunk PE and watch Oprah in the afternoon, and I would see that the kind of casual racism and sexism that I would experience in suburban Essex that was celebrated would be booed in those audiences. And I thought I think I need to get in there. And it looked also, in terms of the different shows that I was watching, The Big Breakfast and the comedians I like Eddie Izzard, there was a lot of joy and freedom. And I thought, I think Weirdos will be all right over there. And I'm not sure how well I'll do if I stay here.
So you had to construct one. You had to construct a character.
Construct a weirdo. Yeah, I suppose that's
well,
true.
because TV works in that way, doesn't it? Where a boss will go, "Oh, we love that. That's really good. This works." And so you end up sort of building on it and being more like that. Or was it all just you?
I think I was very strongly influenced by Ruby Wax and Dame Edna Everage. And so when it came to doing shows, when I got my dream job as a kid interviewing people, I thought, well, that's how I should interview them, because that would be the most interesting thing to do. And that seemed to go quite well. Eventually, I got quite bored. Once I know how to do something, I get quite bored, which is why I think I'll be all right with the stand-up and the filmmaking, because I don't feel like I'll ever know how to do either of them perfectly. They're so, it's like stand-up is just, there's an infinite amount of stuff to figure out there. And then filmmaking is so complicated. I think I'll be able to do that for the rest of my life, probably.
But I mean, I find it quite fascinating. I mean, I suppose I find it fascinating because I've been in telly essentially doing the same thing for 30 years, and you moved on, having felt you cracked it. And
well, there's still time for you. I mean,
but you try, having tried really, really hard. Was it that you got there and thought, this is all a bit disappointing? This just isn't what I thought it was. As an industry, as an entertainment form, as a way of expressing yourself, I don't know what.
I think what happens is you get the thing that you've always dreamed of, and the problem is you thought the results of the thing you were doing were the thing. So Benjamin is a filmmaker whose entire life is his image of himself as a cool dude filmmaker. And when his film comes out and isn't reviewed well, his whole life is destroyed because he hasn't got anything else. And he talks in one of the opening scenes, he's being interviewed, and the interview says something like, "I really loved your first film," and he says, "Yeah, ideally I would have just made that film and died, but life keeps going, and so you have to keep doing things." And he hasn't got to a point of realizing that it's the joy of doing the thing. Like, if you're still enjoying doing Channel 4 News, and why wouldn't you be enjoying that, then you must keep doing it, because what a joy. I think I was so I think I was so interested in where I will get to and what it will mean for me to have a name, to have made a name for myself. And I kind of forgot that it was enjoyable. And so now I feel so happy learning all this new stuff. It's fun,
You can enjoy making a film.
Yeah, it's so much fun to be on a film set. And you're distracted for hours and hours every day with so many decisions, and you're playing with actors, and you're seeing like something that looks like real life happening on your monitor, and you're going in and you're improving it, and you're coming back, and there's a costume to decide on. There's like endless stuff to play with. And also, I'm not on screen, and so there's none of this vanity, and I'm not worried about what my hair looks like and all this nonsense. And so for my own like spiritual journey towards peace and serenity, it helps that stuff's taken out for a while.
Why aren't you on screen? Because in some of the stuff that you've written, you have been, the sitcom, and in Benjamin, the writer is the star of his own film.
Yes.
But you were not the star of Benjamin.
Well, I met Colin Morgan, who was so naturally funny and made me care so much about the character. I just thought, why would you not have this brilliant actor? And there's so much to do. After I did Carnage, I did this film called Carnage for the BBC, where I just did the voiceover at the end. And it was so much fun. It was such a satisfying experience to just work with Martin Freeman from behind the camera, and work with Joanna Lumley and all the other various brilliant people, Kirsty Walk, and we did all this stuff where it was enough for me, and enough for my ego to have written and directed by. I didn't need to also have my face in it. It was enough.
Carnage was about veganism and
I like to say it's about carnism.
carnism.
Yeah.
Were you trying to sell a message, or was it just a good idea? I mean, were you trying to change the way people think?
Well, I suppose I was, but I knew that it wouldn't work if I thought too much about trying to change the way people think. I thought the priority is make this as funny and as compelling as it can be, and then everything else will take care of itself. I'd watched a documentary called Earthlings, which was so upsetting, and it was about how how human animals use other animals in terms of food and clothing, and it was so traumatizing. I felt upset for about 2 days, and I thought there must be a way of getting this message across in a way that isn't traumatizing, that might make people laugh. And so I ended up writing a segment from a musical about a cow, where you see this cow singing about having her child stolen from her so that her milk can be stolen from her breasts by human beings. And it's an emotive, kind of absurd, funny song. And it worked, it worked. People have told me that
they stopped drinking milk.
They stopped drinking cow's milk. And I mean, we actually wrote it into that. Lindsay Duncan played the fifth wave feminist Maud Polikoff, and she talks about that. She's sat in the future. The whole thing is set in 2067, looking back at a time when people ate other animals. And the whole pretend premise of the documentary is to show the young people of 2067 that their grandparents and great-parents, they didn't know any better. They just did what they were supposed to do. And so it's quite a compassionate film. But you have Lindsay Duncan saying, that musical was just so compelling. You just had to go out and buy oat milk. And that seems to have happened a little bit. I mean, on the week that it was released, I did actually go to a dinner party, and people were telling me how much they loved Carnage. But at the same time, they were eating the legs of chickens. So I thought, well, you can't have loved it that much.
But it was sort of ahead of its time, wasn't it? Because veganism and all that conversation is really big right now. I mean, it is at different times in modern history, but it really feels like it's sort of come of age right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we were somehow at the beginning of a wave. We just jumped on that wave, or were part of it. It's difficult because there's no...
Or maybe you need those sorts of things to build ideas until they reach a sort of a critical mass.
Yes, and I think if we did anything by being funny about it, we changed... I think maybe this is the power of comedy sometimes. You change where the joke is. So the vegan person may have been the punchline to the joke before that film or at that time. And now I feel like the people with plant-based diets can feel quite confident to make fun of the people eating animals or consuming their personal liquids. Like, for a long time, it was like the vegan was like insane. But, if we were in a field right now and I was, eating a carrot with some hummus and you were like killing a goat, you'd be the lunatic. I'm just enjoying my carrot.
So much of your material is mined from your own life and experience. Mm-hmm. That wasn't, the idea came from your own life, certainly. Does everything you do have to come from your life? I mean, is next, when you're my age in 10 years' time, you're going to be writing about your 30s and what that was like.
I can't really predict it, but I would guess that it will always be a bit of both. So there'll be a film, Carnage came about because someone at the BBC asked if I had any ideas, and I had a bit of stand-up that I remembered writing a few years before that, where I imagined myself in the future looking back at all the things that frustrate me in the actual present. And there was a line like, do you remember when people got upset when their pets died, and then when other animals died, they ate them? I thought maybe there's a whole film where we set ourselves in the future looking back at the horrors of the present. And I feel the need every now and then. I have this urge to figure out what's wrong with me, or I feel confused about something and I need to work it out. And that happens through stand-up. The stand-up will probably always be quite personal, but then there's always these bits of, even the stuff that's kind of like an opinion that isn't like from my own from a relationship or a family issue. Even that's coming from like just my own frustration with a country that has a monarchy. Like, that's just, sometimes I feel like I'm insane if I don't express this stuff. And when the laughter comes, there's a kind of agreement. You sort of force people to agree. If they're laughing, it's like they're saying, you are right. We're not sure what to do about that, but yeah, I mean, you are right about that.
How much of your ability to enjoy things now do you think is to do with the fact that you're in a relationship and happy and not lonely?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I was quite lonely for a while, so it was difficult to enjoy things because there was no one there. There was no one there, Krishnan. I think it's easier if you're in a relationship with someone, with the person that you're supposed to be in the relationship with. It's not, I've been in relationships and thought this is better than loneliness, and actually it's worse. So you have to be in the right relationship.
Have you been really lonely?
Yeah, I used to have a joke about having buying a new flat, and it had 2 sinks, and one of them what was the joke? It was something like, well, I'd brush my teeth in one, and in the other one I'd mainly cry. It's so sad.
But I mean, because you shouldn't have been, should you? Is the point? So,
I agree.
you shouldn't have had 2 sinks, but
that was the problem.
The thing about your loneliness, or the way you talked about your loneliness, is it doesn't, it surprises people, I think, because people imagine, well, you had this sort of charmed life of success, and you're hanging out with cool people in the music industry and TV, and how on earth can you be lonely? But that's often what people think about lonely people. Lonely people are often surprisingly lonely.
But all that stuff's nonsense, right? That, I don't know what your deal is, but you could be doing the news every day and feel like the glamorous news guy and go home to your cat, and that wouldn't be quite enough, would it? I used to do stand-up during single times, and because I was after the result of the work rather than the work, I would feel this hole after the show that needs to be filled by either chocolate cake or sex, and I ended up eating a lot of chocolate cake, and that hole isn't there anymore. I feel like I fill that. I feel nourished by changing my perspective on the work that I'm doing, and also because I started nourishing my own life outside of my career. I was so focused from the age of 13 on just getting somewhere, and it meant there was just no time for anything else. And I didn't really value anything else until maybe I was 30-something. Nothing else really mattered. If it wasn't going to be part of a performance somewhere, then what did it matter? If people didn't see it, what did it matter?
Do you think there's any specific loneliness, though, that comes from or comes for gay men whose families are not completely okay with their sexuality and therefore they can't talk about it that easily?
I don't know, because I only know what happened to me, I suppose.
Because you talked a lot and written about your own experience and how it wasn't a terribly easy process with your parents, and I suppose that's not about loneliness in a relationship or not, but it makes you pretty alone when you're going through a sort of a formative period of your life, isn't it?
I suppose so. I'm quite resistant to talking about things that I've presented as fairly universal and reducing them to just sexual identity.
So you don't think there's an additional element, though, to the sexual identity? Because it's another reason why, a young person might not be able to talk to their family, for example, who may not accept their sexuality.
Sure, it could be even worse.
Yeah.
But so many people experience loneliness. And in the film that I've made, Benjamin's problem, or his problems, are loneliness, anxiety, and depression. Those problems come to do with his personality being a personality that is desperate for attention rather than nourishment. And that could be anyone. Anyone could be lonely, depressed, anxious. A lot of people are. And I'm wary to sort of narrow it down into some kind of subset of loneliness. And this film is a love story. It's not a subset of love in a story. It's a universal love story. So I'm kind of into I'm kind of I think that's how I've been in most of my career. I've been into transcending any kind of limiting label, so that I can connect with as many people as possible. I'm not interested in just connecting with people who have the exact same identity as me.
Yeah, no, I get that, but you've been incredibly open about your own experience, haven't you?
Sure.
And your own feelings along the way since you were a teenager.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that.
And that can't have been easy either, can it?
What, being open?
Yeah.
I think it would have been easier to be closed. I think that would be the real pain if I felt like I couldn't express something. The painful thing for me always is the moment before I say the thing, when I feel ashamed or terrified, and then the freedom comes from telling the truth.
Is that your sort of is that your way to change the world then? Sort of the universal advice.
Yeah, I think so. The truth will set you free. That someone said that, right? Was it
Somebody
Jesus or
said
was it
that.
me? Let's say it was me. I think that was me.
Does it always though? I mean, are you one of those people who's a rubbish liar, and therefore when somebody says at the end of the film, as in your film, it was awful, wasn't it? You would say, yeah, it was awful.
Oh no, I would. We should say that that's the character's film within the film that's
Yes.
awful. The film that I've made.
The film that you've made is great.
Reviews,
but
everyone
in the
loves
film,
it.
Yes.
In the film, I wouldn't be so there's a PR character in the film who's this shallow, shameless liar. I wouldn't be that person, but I would be kind in the way that his best friend is kind in the film, and try to be positive about it. Or I wouldn't.
You're not brutally truthful.
Not in that way.
And there's no merit to that.
No, I'm not trying to be. It's all coming from a place of compassion, I think. A lot of it is compassion for my younger self. It's like I'm trying to let that kid who hasn't been heard or hasn't been, had his feelings addressed out. I'm trying to let all that stuff out so that there's no anxiety that I need to be somebody other than who I just am right now. I'm trying to get to a place where I'm just free. That seems to be the aim for me. Maybe it's about taking the risk of telling the truth each time. And Carnage really is just a film where I'm presenting the truth of a situation, a really horrific situation. And I'm just telling the truth about it with humor because I feel like being funny is the way I get listened to. And it's a risk, it was a risk doing that because people could think, when I sent it to my script editor, the first draft, he said, well, it's not very funny, but it's quite preachy, so how's that going for it? And that was terrifying because I thought, oh God, what am I going to do about this? So I made it as funny as possible and took any preachiness out of it.
And that's the thing that mitigates the risk of telling the truth.
Yes. Yeah, if it's funny. Yeah, because then there's, then at least you've given people something as well.
Is that what you were like as a young child? Where did the funny bit come from? Were you always like that?
I did my first stand-up gig when I was about 13 years old. And it was only because I was at a Saturday morning stage school and there were these dancers. I'm not sure why I wasn't part of the dance gang, actually, because I did learn tap. But there was a tap routine and then there was a ballet routine scheduled one after the other during the biannual variety show. And they needed something to be happening in front of a curtain to cover the shoe change. So I said at 13 years old, maybe I could do stand-up comedy. And the drama teacher, rather than saying, are you sure? Because stand-up comedy is quite hard and you're a child, said, sure, that sounds great. And so I then did a gig at this theatre in Hornchurch, and I loved hearing the laughter. I thought, this is a good sound. I like this. I need to do a lot more of this. But it wasn't like being the class clown. It was only on stage. And I was at that Saturday morning stage school because I was so shy, I wouldn't go anywhere. So I learned how to be on stage, but I wasn't very good one-on-one.
So where did that idea come from? If you weren't the kind of kid who was constantly performing in real life and trying to get a laugh and try to attract attention, what made you think, I know what I can do. I can go and do that really, really hard thing of going up on stage and making people laugh.
Well, I didn't think it would be hard. And I've been watching a lot of late night Channel 4 comedians, I think from the Montreal Comedy Festival probably. And they seemed very joyful, playful, clown-like. And there seemed to be some freedom. They were kind of subversive and strange, and it was exciting. I thought you get to be peculiar if you can do that. And that felt safe and exciting to me.
Joy is something I've heard you talking about before as a general goal in life, which is good.
Yeah.
It's better than the alternative. Where did that come from? Did that come from ayahuasca or therapy or what?
Yeah, so after 2 years of psychotherapy, I went to Peru and drank ayahuasca. And during one of the... Do I have to explain what that is? Maybe people can look it up. I feel like I've banged on about it enough. Should I explain a little bit?
The 10-second explanation.
Ayahuasca is a healing plant medicine that's been used by the indigenous people of Peru for thousands of years to heal themselves.
Yes.
And now Westerners can go
there and have a hallucinatory experience that makes them very ill and sick often, but sometimes changes their lives.
More often changes their lives, I would say, and I think the shamans would prefer vision-inducing rather than hallucinogenic, because that suggests a kind of LSD trip. And this is actually, it's a ritual. It's there's a ceremony. It's 4 hours long, and people throw up, but you get your own bucket, and then and you figure out who you are. So it feels like it's worth it. And in one of the visions, maybe in the last ceremony, I saw a gorilla. And very moody looking gorilla. And I said to him, what is all this? Is it just joy? Are we just here for joy? I mean, we all die in the end anyway. Is it just joy? And he looked at me and he said, yes, it's all joy. And I wrote down in my notepad, joy confirmed. So that's what I'm after now. I'm just after the joy of doing stuff. And I remember every time before I go on stage, I tell myself, remember, you enjoy this. You might be tired, but this is exactly what you want to be doing. And every day on the set for Benjamin, I thought these are long days, but this is what I wanted to be doing. The joy of doing this. I won't be able to do this forever. This is joyful. Before I did this podcast, I thought I'm a bit nervous, but remember that you enjoy doing this kind of thing. Try to enjoy it. What's the worst that can happen? And so joy, and it solves everything. There's also joy in sadness. I'm not saying that I'm not trying to be happy all the time. I think there's a lot of joy in like feeling the pain of a moment as well. I'm not trying to get out of pain. I love going to see films where I cry a lot. I'm into that. I really like feeling all that. I suppose what joy is about for me is about surrendering to the moment that you're in rather than trying to get somewhere else where you might feel better.
It's very profound, isn't it? No, it's great. I was thinking, oh, that would be nice. That would be really nice to live like that.
Hey, you should go back to that therapist.
Or maybe going to. I was actually offered ayahuasca, but unfortunately, it was in the middle of a filming trip. So I thought, well, you can't do ayahuasca because that's going to like knock me out for 4 days in the middle of a Channel 4 documentary shoot. Which
What's
just
more
wouldn't be
important?
good.
The thing is, what's more important, Krishnan? The Channel 4 documentary shoot or your health and happiness?
I'm married with children.
Okay, and miserably. Well, they wouldn't want you to be happy. Those people.
No.
Yeah.
Actually, no. It was purely practical. Actually,
What you could do is combine it. That might be the answer
Yes.
for you. Combine it with a documentary, and then you'll sort of feel safe because you're also working.
that would sort of ruin it, I think. But
Maybe.
would you ever do it again, or have you done? That's it. You've done it, and there's no need.
I felt the need about 3 years ago for something, but it was because I hadn't quite mastered my own ritual for each morning to keep me joyful and strong. You know, I came out of that experience just feeling strong and reset. I got to the root of the depression. I felt alive and excited for life, and there's a moment when you're back in the real world with all of the pressures and the nonsense of the real world, and you have to find something to reconnect to that feeling. And it turned out to be jumping around every morning like a lunatic to music with wireless headphones. And now I have that. I feel like I'm good now. I've got something that.
Is that your religion? I presume you're not religious. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a jumper.
Were you ever? I mean, were you brought up religious at all?
No,
To believe in anything,
not really.
or-
No, I had a bar mitzvah. That was about it. And I'm circumcised, which is an outrage. But that is not time for that. But yeah, I think jumping.
There is.
Okay, let me get a knife. What was I going to say? Yeah, jumping around. But I did, in the new stand-up show, there's a bit about visiting a sweat lodge in Norfolk. And that seemed to be the... do you know about sweat lodges?
No.
A sweat lodge is a Native American ritual for resolving inner or outer conflict in a hot womb-like teepee in Norfolk.
In Norfolk.
Has to be Norfolk. And it was incredible. I kind of got to... I got to honor my mother and my child self for doing our best in difficult circumstances. I hadn't said that out loud. And this is the kind of thing that I would feel embarrassed to say out loud. But there were two ceremonies. And in the second one, I found myself able to say something like that. And it's very difficult because if you're a comedian, you know, that you have to be cynical and you have to be... you have to be like, you'd be like, come on, this shaman. Who's this shaman in the middle of Norfolk? But it was incredibly powerful. And I came out of that teepee reborn again. I don't know how many times I'm going to be reborn, but maybe once every 3 years. And, I cried, and it was just the most beautiful thing.
How important was it to, because you've also thanked your mother at the beginning of the book, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
So how important is it to be able to do that in that public way? Because you've also talked in your comedy about how awkward the relationship can be with your parents, or your mum in particular.
Yeah, I think thanking...
And a lot of us have that, where we sort of, in speeches or moments or birthdays, we can stand up and say, I love my mum, she's amazing, and I wouldn't be where I am, I wouldn't be who I am, But then when we talk to our parents at the weekend, we're just like, yeah, fine, just put the tea down there and just like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah, it's true. But, she did birth me out of her body. How can I ever thank her for that? The best I can do is thank her in a book and occasionally introduce her to a celebrity.
So you haven't resolved that bit yet?
What's that?
The joy of that particular joy.
No, I have. You know what I did? Writing that sitcom, I really figured out my relationship with my family. I understood eventually. I thought I was going to write something about, again, like in the romantic relationships, I thought I was going to write something about my family being insane. And it turned out that I was writing about me being unable to accept them as they are. That I was every week in that sitcom, I went around and tried to fix or change my family. And what I learned was, if you want to get on with your family, all you have to do is not expect them to be any different to how they were last time. Just sit there and go, these are funny people. How funny. And of course they're like that, because they had parents. And it must, there's a moment recently where I realized, because I was talking to my dad about his mother, and I've always found my dad to be kind of cold and distant, awkward, and he was talking about his mother and how cold and distant she was. And I thought, God, that's worse than having a cold, distant father, to have a mother like that. And I thought, you're the more vulnerable one. Forget trying to get your love. I have to find some way to love you.
And so do you have to express this to them?
No, I just do it on stage.
In this new spirit of being honest, and finding the joy in things, are you able to confront those sorts of truths with people one-to-one?
Yes, I do a bit of that. So when I came back from Peru, I called my mum and I said, I feel like I saw some stuff. I don't know if it's real or just in my head, but I feel like I saw how difficult life was for you when I was very young. And she said it was. And I said, okay. And she didn't, I was open for her to keep going, but it felt like that was enough. And there've been moments like that. There should maybe be more.
Okay, so you've dealt with veganism. Are there any other causes you want to tackle? Or would you have to keep them secret until you do it?
No, it's difficult. I wish I was someone who could write a list and then think of a funny thing to do with them. I'd love to. I just thought, I was about to say, what I should be saying is I would love to say something funny about the climate crisis. I wish I could make a film. I mean, Carnage had an element of the climate crisis within it, in that if we don't move to a plant-based diet, then we're screwed. So that's just a necessary thing that we have to do.
Yeah.
It's totally unsustainable what we're doing at the moment, as well as being horrific. But what was I going to say? I was going to say I'd love to solve the climate crisis. I'd really love to do that, Krishnan.
You'd like to find something funny in the climate crisis?
Yeah, I don't think I'm a...
So you can't do that. You can't say, well, let's tackle that issue and then
very
write
difficult.
amusingly about it.
No, it has to just sort of like come up, and I'd like it to. I think that would be great because it feels like that's the priority. I don't know why anyone's talking about anything else other than the climate crisis.
But do you have a sort of a non-funny list of things that you'd like to change? You don't necessarily have to feel that you have a joke about it. It's just sort of, these are the things I would like to do if it was the world according to Simon.
I think the one word would probably be compassion. I think if there was just a load of compassion everywhere, we'd be all right. So that would include compassion for people who we don't really think deserve compassion. So I think in my ideal world, Krishnan, there would be no prisons. There would just be rehabilitation centers, because I feel like the people who have committed those crimes were lacking the love that would have meant they wouldn't have committed those crimes. I think if we can just love everyone, we'll be all right.
Lots of things would stem from that.
Yeah. And similarly, the climate crisis has come about because we think of ourselves as separate from the planet that we're sitting on. That we think that we're... I got in Peru that, we think of... there's that charity, Friends of the Earth. I mean, a good charity, but we're not friends of the Earth. Like, we are Earth. It's us. It's us. And the idea that we can, that we think that we're separate from it and can use it is crazy.
I mean, are you at all political on a day-to-day basis, or are these just sort of big ideas? Do you look at Brexit and go into deep depressions about it or anything like that, or do you engage with the world on that level?
No, not really. But only because it would bring me down and I wouldn't be able to do anything else. I really, I'm aware of what's going on, but I'm not, I can't be.
You don't want to be a political comedian in that sense?
No. I don't think that's where I'm best served. I think that's or where the world is served by me. I don't think it's not going to help. Also, it just dates so quickly. If you write any topical jokes, then you can't do them the next month. So I feel like I want to do stuff that's universal and about human emotion. And I don't know how you feel. You're sort of in it. You're in it every day, aren't you? And it's sort of difficult to take a broader view, which I guess is why you've done this podcast, right?
Yeah, partly.
So that's good. I find it quite disconnecting listening to politicians on the radio or the TV, because I guess they feel they can't be vulnerable. They're so defended. I spent so long trying to get to a place of authenticity and connection. The idea of spending my time listening to people who need some therapy.
are the total opposite. No, you're absolutely right.
And I think I'm not totally blind to what's going on in the world. There's a bit in the film where Benjamin goes to see this piece of contemporary dance. It's a very pretentious piece of contemporary dance by a very defended, scared dancer who's trying to make people think she's cool. And it's the worst kind of music that goes along with it.
I laughed out loud at that bit.
Thank you. And Benjamin feels so, it's at a point in his life where it's just despair watching this thing. And similarly, I think when I don't want to despair, I don't want to turn on the news and see somebody trying to convince people of something, when really what they should maybe be saying is, I don't know what I'm doing. Somebody needs to help me. I can't do this alone. I don't know how I ended up in this situation. I think probably because my mum didn't love me enough. And so I felt like I could gain her love by becoming somebody very important and running the world. I thought maybe if I could just run the world, I would feel safe. And yet I still don't feel safe. It's worse than ever. I could listen to that.
I think you should write that sitcom, actually, or that movie, because it sounds brilliant. Simon, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Krishnan, guru-murthy.